as you serve society and the planet in the future. I'm delighted to be back with you. We're going into the next zone right now, and with accelerated change, we're going to need to get ready. Now, the information that I share with you today is very current, although some of it you may question some of it because it doesn't fit with tradition, some of the mythology that we sometimes feel comfortable with. And the survey comes from 698 professional practices with about 34,000 staff and billing out at about $7 billion a year. And in the AE space, the fees that are billed every year are just about $30 billion. And the AEC industry, the second highest GNP in the United States, is just slightly over $1 trillion. So the design professionals, the planners, the landscape architects, and the architects play a critical role in shaping the relevancy and the efficiency of design to make more impact on our environments. When we do our surveys, we also tend to look at firms of whether they're a global practice, whether they're a national practice, whether they're a regional practice and categorical leader, or whether they are primarily a new startup or a city practice, but with notable contributions to the profession. The firms that I'm going to share with you today are those firms that are considered the leaders in each of the categories, the most published firms, those that are talked about in the media, and those that are also in the Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal, and so on. So let's get right into this and look at the outlook. I'm going to share with you some perceptions of the health of the underlying profession that then we're going to try to launch forward from. Last year, architects and designers who said that they were optimistic about the future of their practice, defined as the next 3 years, about 60% were optimistic. And this year in the survey, it's headed in the right direction. There's still a lot of underemployed and unemployed professionals, but 73% of architects and designers are optimistic about their practice. Keep in mind that there are many professionals who go to work in education and government and some in industry. And this survey is private practice, and this is where the majority of professionals spend their career. The employment growth rate is projected to be at 5.5%, a very encouraging thing after we, of course, we're not a rocket, but we're also not drilling down any further. The utilization target rate simply means the percentage of billable time that's based on a 40-hour work week. Many design professionals work more than a 40-hour work week, but this is the way that we keep statistics, and the utilization target for this year is 70.5. Almost all firms won't achieve that level, but that is the target rate, and when they look at the staffing that they have, and they look at the work that's being done, and assigning that work out, this is the target that they have to meet their budgets and to meet their profit margins. 70.5. If you get much higher than that, you get a reputation of being a sweatshop. If you get much lower than that, you're not making profits, and without profits, there's no future in your enterprise. Amen. Now, we run a happiness index for graduates, which is always kind of interesting. And in 2005, we had a happiness index that rose way up to 89. And right now we're at only 52. But at least look at the direction there. It's sure better than 31. The gross revenues per full-time equivalent is one of the standard dashboard items in a professional practice. It's something that you should always be keeping in mind because it's one measure of your productivity. It's one measure, too, of how competitive you are with other professional practices. And we see that the gross revenues per full-time equivalent are now a little over 200,000. But remember that that's an average number, meaning that is high and our backlog is looking good, then maybe we can go up even further. Maybe 400 is a reasonable goal for the next 5 to 8 years, for example. And it's all headed in the right direction. By the way, just 10 years ago, it was below 100,000. So this means that productivity is increasing. Now, I would like to talk about design compensation a little bit, because I don't think that any organization, consulting enterprise, or journal keeps track of design compensation to the degree that we do. And here I would just like to show you on the left side, those people with design degrees, bachelor, and that 3.2% that you can barely see in the light green, that just implies what the target bonus is. So, get out with a bachelor's degree, you're going to be shooting for around $40,000, master's around 44, with 10 years experience, 72, but then your projected bonus goes up to 5.7, and with 20, about 101. If you're leaders, and not just if you're an equity, in other words, if you can be a leader of the firm, be a principal of the firm, without having equity in the firm. If you are a principal in the firm and you don't have any ownership, you're currently at $135,500, and the target bonus for that zone is 27%. If you have some equity, you can see how the situation improves. And if you're a partner with significant equity, you can see how that situation improves up to $180,000 plus a year-end bonus if the firm meets its profitability targets of about 62.5%. These are projections for year-end 2011 from firms during the first quarter of this year. The managing partner or the CEO is paid more because they take on more responsibility. Now I inserted this slide because we're here to talk about the base, what we're launching from, right? And I just want you to understand the current condition and to look at the best of class firms and the second level of firms. So on the left-hand column, if you just go over here, pay attention to this, and you'll see the middle 20% is at 152. These are principles with engineering practice. But pay especially attention to that highest 20. Right? There are just a few things different that the best of class practices do differently, right, than the average practices do, or than those who are below average. So the mythology that don't go into landscape architecture or architecture if you want to make money, that mythology just doesn't pan out when you look at the statistics. Although there's plenty of room at the bottom if that's where you'd like to serve. But I would encourage you to be aspirational, because if you are, there are rewards, and this is not fiction. The exporting, this question came up when we were downtown last night, and so I thought I would put in a slide that maybe anticipates some of what you're thinking. And that is that there's a huge amount of design talent that is being exported outside of this country, and there was no recession in this category. If you go back to, on the far right side, that's 1998, on the left side is 2010, and you can see how international fees by just the top 30 firms in the United States grew from $336 million in '98 to about $1.6 billion in 2010. And today, as we look at the firms that are practicing, we keep a log of all the firms practicing around the world and what their fees are. We're very fortunate that they all participate in the research. And so we can tell you what those exported services are in South America, in the Middle East, in Asia, in Europe, and so on. And then we can show this firm by firm. And in the library, you have the Almanac of Architecture and Design, and some of the information from our research is in the Almanac. Some of these firms are actually, partly because of the recession and partly because of their strategy, they're billing more outside the United States than they're billing inside the United States. I would hasten to add that this does not include interior design, and this does not include engineering. This is just pure architecture, landscape architecture, planning services. You know, a firm like Skidmore, Owings & Merrill of Chicago, they do more of their work outside the United States than inside the United States, and a full 20% of their revenues come from planning. So they're doing new cities in Africa, and new cities in India, and they're, they have a whole engagement, sustainability team that's engaged globally. So this is what we expect to see in December of this year. This is a bit of a forecast, and not too reckless of a forecast. The average president of a firm in North America will make $318,000. 17% of firms will have more female than male staff. The average equity principal, somebody who owns the firm and has an equity stake in that firm, their compensation will be $200,000. The mean age of principals is 53, not nearly as high as some in the associations have speculated, by the way. And 23% of firms expect to reduce their compensation this year from last year. The reason that that's so encouraging is that that's the smallest number that we have seen in 4 years. The first-year intern salary is stable. The architect with 10 years experience is slightly down, but their bonus is slightly up. And the growth rate projected, and this is a key one for those of you who will be entering practice in the next 3 years, for example. But we're looking at growth of 3.8% of the services that are now being performed by these professional practices. This, if you take this over 10 years in a linear sort of way, which is dangerous, but it's also one interesting way of looking at it. You know, that means that the architecture profession will be growing by 38% over the next 10 years. There is an entrepreneurial zeal and high energy component to that that is required. So I hasten to mention that. But there are huge opportunities. Huge opportunities, not just to solve molehill kinds of technical problems, but to move mountains. And they're going to be before you. Now, some things don't change in professional practice. Some things you might say are like the Rock of Gibraltar that you want to be encouraging and getting stronger by the day. And here's what they are. This is what firms look for. First of all, they want to have the very best talent. That is the #1 criteria. So if you're going to work in a firm, you want to be that very best talent, and you want to be a collaborator so that people will appreciate it. Not arrogant so that people reject it or deflect it, but you want to be there. The second one is service value, and it's true that services are there is downward fee pressure. There is a situation where quality is going up, but some of the fees are going down. That is service value, and that's not going to go away. That's the business side of this profession. Devoted servant leaders, that passion that you have to actually lead in this industry. A meritocracy, which means you're ready to be stand up and counted. You're ready to be accountable, and when you are, you will be rewarded at the high levels. Remember the chart of the top 20% and the top 40%? That's where the meritocracy pays off. It's like saying, you know, for your professional baseball team, you have 3 outfielders, and they don't all make the same amount because they're they have different responsibilities, and they're of different value to the team. I must hasten to add ethical standards, the highest levels of professionalism, which don't come from other businesses, by the way, because you're a profession first and a business second. A strong culture of excellence that you're going to be, you know, it's worth working those extra hours to achieve the level of excellence to benefit the user communities that you're working in and the clients that you're working in. And then number 7 is to have a constructive paranoia, to be looking over your shoulder, to be ready for what's next. And not to slide, and not to become complacent, or not to coast. If you ever start coasting in your career, there's only one way to coast, and that's down. And when that happens, you're vulnerable to competition. And you don't want to be in that space because it doesn't feel good. There's no good reason to coast. There's every good reason to have constructive paranoia about the future. We have a really interesting survey that's filled it's our trends analysis program. We have 2 full-time architectural historians on our staff. We have several survey experts on our staff. And we monitor and abstract from the internet and from all the media, really, the stories on what's changing. You know, this can be the real estate section of the Financial Times out of London. It can be the property report in the New York Times. But it can also be regional newspapers. And we develop from all of this, we have them big up on tents and in our digital files, and we develop the implications for the design professions. Where are the future opportunities? How big are they? And what strategies might engage in this space? And then we employ something that I don't know if anyone has used this terminology before, but it's objective futurism. And we try to forget, actually, what we think we know and open our minds to what we need to know. Our minds are too full of the rear view mirror stuff about our profession and not nearly hungry enough for the opportunities that are straight ahead. So we put them into quadrants, and we understand on the vertical side what is the trajectory, the pace of change or the speed of change, and then on the bottom what's most important. And we interview practitioners about their feelings on this. We chart all of this out. It comes out every year in the January, February issue of Design Intelligence, and this is where we get the 25 trends that are transforming the design professions. This leads to game-changing shifts, and we are living during the most dynamic time for our AEC industry, really in the history of the planet. Let me just share with you these and consider them. Well, just in the last 3 years, we've been shrinking in markets all over. Only healthcare and higher education have been markets that haven't shrunk dramatically. Now we're in a period of time where we can see some growing markets, not just internationally, but in North America as well. There has been, in the last 3 years, a dominance of government funding, some of the TARP funds, some of the incentives, and now we're headed into a time where the private funding, the equity and the capital markets that exist within corporations, because they are more profitable again, and there is consumer demand, and so we're seeing growth in private funding. So if you're working only with local, state, regional, and federal government programs, you're going to see declining markets. By the way, we look at this on a county-by-county basis in the United States. Our firms and practices have been led by baby boomer leaders, and this shift is underway right now to Generation X leadership. We have been a profession of solo artists and silo disciplines. No longer. We're seriously going into integrated expert teams. Those teams need coaches and quarterbacks, and very often it's going to be others who are going to be looking to you to be that quarterback of these expert integrated teams. Are you ready for that? We've been largely operating with percentage fees, even when they're calculated as a flat fee. They've been based on a percentage, and we're headed into new value-based fees, and we keep case studies here. Firms have been working locally, now they're working globally. We've been in stable professions, relatively stable professions. You sort of knew what you were going to get when you would go into landscape architecture. Well, now we're looking at dynamic and entrepreneurial professions. And there's going to be a lot of competition from outside the profession coming inside, because they see the opportunities to make money, to grow business, to be more competitive. And so some people are going to be saying, well, you know, we can get these young architects and landscape architects to work for us, for our corporation, even though we're not a professional practice. We would think of when we lay out our PERT charts and our linear charts, we're going to hand off from team to team through the project. This is no longer the case. The game-changing issue here is that there are simultaneous processes going on. Sometimes these are IPD, sometimes these are design build, hundreds of definitions for design build, you know, and these simultaneous processes mean that phase 2 and phase 3 can overlap. We are moving from mixed media technology to BIM, dynamic sharing BIM. We recommend to all of our clients that 100% of their work be done in BIM. We're moving from design as objects of material art much more into the design as organic science. All over our planet, architects and landscape architects and planners are leading sustainable design solutions beyond the LEED definitions, beyond, in some cases, even the Architecture 2030 at Masria definitions. And so these people are hopeful, and when asked the question, are you optimistic about the future of the planet? The good ones will say, yes, I am. I'm an architect, and I have the following reasons for being optimistic. You know, construction has been a dirty, gritty, and sometimes corrupt industry. But as you'll see here, the trends as we watch them, if we're watching the tea leaves correctly, construction is going to be a lean and clean industry and more of an industry of the future. We're looking at going from evolution to revolution, and what's going to go with the turf of revolution is disruptive things. And so we don't want to get myopia about this. We want to develop our peripheral vision, and we want to get ready for disruptive innovation, and you can be creating that. You don't need to be the victim of this disruptive innovation. Architects sometimes have been poorly managed with command and control kinds of leadership. Well, visionary team leaders is what people are looking for. And we had a good discussion this morning about the future of generalist practices. The future of generalist practices really doesn't look very bright. Those practices need to become expert, branded practices where they're famous for something, where they do some things better than anybody else in the state of Arizona. And they're not just in that space, but there's a continuous learning and innovation in that space. And then we talk about number 15, the simulated models and rollouts. So when you think about your condition today, you might write down a few things about your current condition, and you might be satisfied with it, or you might not be satisfied with it. But remember to have some constructive paranoia, because it'll actually help you to cope. You can put fear behind you, because if you anticipate some of these puzzles that are impacting now on our profession, you will move from your current condition into your future condition as a pioneer and as an innovator and as a satisfied professional. You can do that. You need not play to this bell curve, which is the typical life cycle, which in life cycle there is a decline and then there is death. And people sometimes say to me, well, you know, in our new strategic plan, Jim, it seems like there's some uncomfortable things in here. I'm not sure I'm comfortable making as many changes as we have in our plan. And everybody feels that way. And the reason is that this, the natural life cycle, that which feels comfortable, leads to death. What the unnatural is to go for the reinvention. And this reinvention, I would like to say, see yourself in this picture. And one of the interesting things to just keep in the back of your mind is that there is more acceleration of change than there has been in the past. So we don't have to wait from age generation to age generation for the new life cycle to kick in. We'll actually invent it right now, goodness, 3-4 times within an age generation and go forward, maybe even more than that. And so context is changing. We could look at population studies, where we're headed for 7 billion. We could look at generational studies. We could look at technological studies. We could look at sustainability studies. And that is the context for change. And our strategy here, you can see, hooks up with the context. But there is a new context, and it's going to be rolling out. And you're going to be graduating into a new context. So as you interview these firms that you're going to be working with, and as you lead these firms, think about what your new strategies are going to be for these new contexts. Well, I'm just about finished, and I want to turn it over to my co-speakers and co-panelists today. But keep in mind that the roles are blurring in our industry. And there is a phenomenon going where the phenomenon outside many professional practices is moving faster than the phenomenon inside the professional practices. And as I recently wrote about, we see, and I used the word splintering. I wish I hadn't said the professions are splintering. I wish I had said that the professions are branching into new areas of responsibility. And so here you can see where the architects and designers are, and you can see the others in the team in sort of a simplified fashion. What we're seeing is that architects and designers are leading development firms. They're becoming the client's representatives. They are becoming the program managers and getting the extra fees for doing that. They are leading engineering organizations that are EA and AE. They are becoming the specialty consultants in acoustics and forensics and lighting design. They are heading up general contractor firms and doing innovative design build. Graduates in this room, some of them will head up product manufacturers. And for others, you will find a niche in facility management, and the curatorial responsibilities of the design communities will become alive for you. And you can, if we had more time, we would go through other combinations and some case studies of what people are doing. But here's the mental image I'd like just to have you plant in your mind. This little red box should never be defined by state licensing laws. It should never be defined by existing practice as it is. Think more creatively about this branching out and what you love to do and where you see these markets of relevancy being in the future, and then make something like this happen. And that's where you will be redefining the professions during a time of game shift enterprise. This vision is something that many of you will get right here at the University of Arizona. And vision is very important because it gives you motivation through the thick and thin, through the psychological recessions and depressions. And the vision is something that will give you more bounce in your step. You will know that you're adapting to the new situations and opportunities. You don't want to get marginalized as technicians. In this new zone, technicians do not have a very bright future. But there will be technician work done, and much of it will be done by your technologies and by the artificial intelligence embedded into those technologies. So don't wait for the future to happen. Intercept this future and make something special happen. So a lot is changing, and I think that there is one other thing that I just want to say, and that is that the community that you have of intellectual enterprise and design talent and social togetherness here at the University of Arizona is just a key component, and I encourage you to continue building that sense of community. Because one thing is certain in the future, we're going to need each other, and we're going to need to be borrowing ideas from each other to be even stronger. Thank you very much.